You fed my daughter. By the ways of my people, I now belong to you, the Apache mother told the cowboy. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Beckett Shaw had never figured he'd linger this long up on the ridge. 5 years back, he only came here to breathe without choking on the world. The war left him hobbling on one bad leg and sleeping in broken pieces of the night. Then sickness carried off his wife and the unborn child she bore. After that, town just meant stares and whispered pity, and he wanted none of it. So he split logs and raised a cabin out of pine and stone, dug a well with his own hands, strung a fence line around what little land he claimed. It wasn't much, but it stood firm against the winds. His cattle didn't go hungry. The cabin stayed warm, and Beckett kept moving because stopping hurt worse. That morning felt like any other. He was out early, stacking firewood frost, biting the ground, stiff, his left knee aching with each step. He never complained, just shifted weight and kept working. The sun crawled pale over the hills, washed out and cold. As he reached for another log, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He froze, listening. Quiet. At the edge of the timber, 30 yards off, something crouched behind a fallen stump. Small. Still. He waited, watching boots rooted in the grass. No animal moved like that. No grown soul could tuck in behind that stump. Beckett narrowed his eyes and moved forward slow, each step crunching on frost. The shape became clear, a child. A girl, Apache by the look of her. Couldn't be more than 7, maybe 8. She was curled tight, knees hugged to her chest, arms clamped around her legs. No coat, no shoes, grime on her face, and tangled hair. Her lips cracked dry. Her eyes were wide open, staring empty. She didn't flinch when he neared. She didn't speak. Just sat, locked in silence. He crouched down level with her. "Hey," he said low. "You hurt?" She blinked, but gave no sign she understood. Her jaw trembled. Beckett slid his coat off and draped it across her shoulders. Her bones felt weightless. She smelled of dirt and old smoke. Still no stir. He didn't press her. Just gathered her gently, one arm beneath her legs, the other bracing her back. She didn't fight, didn't even tense. That scared him more than if she'd screamed. He carried her across the field back to the cabin. Inside, he laid her down on the bearskin rug by the fire. The flames were already burning. He piled on kindling, worked the bellows till the blaze snapped high. He filled a tin cup with warm water, held it to her lips. She drank cautious in small gulps, like she didn't quite trust it. Then he warmed up last night's beans and cornbread, broke them into little pieces. She ate with both hands, desperate, silent, fast. Beckett said nothing, only watched arms crossed, thoughts circling. Where was her family? What band had she come from? How far had she wandered? How long had she been hiding? When she finished, she pulled his coat tighter and leaned against the hearthstones. She dropped asleep so sudden, it startled him. Beckett sat at the table, eyes fixed on her, listening to the shallow rise and fall of her ribs. His gut knotted. He fed the fire through the night, never fully sleeping, ready, in case someone came knocking, or worse. She slept clear through the next day, shifting only once. Her pulse stayed steady, no fever, just exhaustion. He cleaned her feet with warm water, cut a blanket in 2 to wrap them, laid another over her. Outside, he tended stock, cut more wood, and kept watch on the tree line. Still nothing. By the 3rd morning, he wondered if someone had cast her off on purpose. He was fixing a barn hinge when Pike barked once, then went still. Beckett looked up. A lone figure was climbing the ridge trail. A woman. Moving slow, one hand braced on her thigh, as if her leg gave her trouble. Her dress, deer hide, worn thin and dusty, clung to her shape in the cold wind. The neckline sagged low, showing the curve of her chest. One seam had split along her side, baring the bronze of her waist. Her scratched legs were bare beneath high slits in the skirt, no shoes. Her long braids swung heavy, woven with feathers and beads. Her face struck him, high cheekbones, firm jaw, dark eyes rimmed with fatigue. She didn't call out, just kept walking. Beckett stood, hands at his sides, rifle untouched. She wasn't a threat, only worn to the bone. She stopped a few yards from the cabin door, breath rising hard. "I look for child," she said quietly. He almost missed it. He gave a slow nod and stepped aside. She entered without another word. The girl stirred when her mother came in. Her cracked voice whispered, "Mama." The woman dropped to her knees, gathered her daughter to her chest, fingers burying in her hair, lips pressing to her forehead. The child clung tight to her mother's chest. Beckett stood in the doorway, the fire throwing restless light across the room. The woman lifted her gaze to him. Her eyes were rimmed red, though no tears fell. "My name is Keona," she said. Her accent carried weight, yet her words came clear. Beckett gave a short nod. Beckett. She lowered her head then and did something unexpected. She stayed on her knees. "I follow the old ways," she whispered. "You fed my daughter. She lives because of you. So I come. I belong now if you will have me." She never lifted her eyes. No more words came. Beckett stared, torn. He wasn't a man who believed in sacred vows or customs, yet something in her tone, in the grave stillness of her body, cut through him. Dirt stained her hands. Bruises marked her arms, thin ribs visible through the ripped side seam of her dress. She had suffered, though she wasn't ready to speak it out loud. His eyes drifted to the girl again, now sleeping soundly, her face buried against Keona's side. They had no one else in the world. Beckett drew back, hand braced on the doorframe, and pushed the door open wider. Keona looked up. No words passed. Just a single nod. She rose, gathered Aloe into her arms, and stepped all the way inside. Beckett shut the door behind them. The latch clicked with a weight that felt heavier than it should. He didn't know what path lay ahead, but he knew one thing. They were staying. The morning after Keona crossed into Beckett's cabin, the wind eased, but the air cut sharp and cold. A thin veil of snow clung to fence posts and roof shingles. It would melt before noon, but it was winter's warning all the same. Beckett was already outside before dawn broke, clearing ice from the trough and checking the chimney smoke. It lifted straight up. No wind. Which meant everything inside was still. He eased back in boots, leaving mud prints across the floorboards. Keona was at the hearth, adding wood with practiced ease. Aloe was curled beneath Beckett's coat by the fire, hand tucked under her cheek, breathing steady now. Keona didn't look at him when he came in. She kept stacking wood, then pulled out beans from a burlap sack he'd left the night before. Her movements carried quiet confidence, like she'd done this 1,000 times. Beckett studied her for a moment. Her dress, still torn neckline slipping low, a seam under her arm, split worse. He didn't linger on it, but he noticed. He couldn't help it. He was a man. Still, his eyes shifted to the bruises on her arms, finger-shaped and fresh, though fading. She hadn't told him what they ran from. Not yet. But Beckett knew the kind of hands that left marks like that. He cleared his throat. "You need clothes. For you, for her." Keona nodded once, eyes down. "She has a name, Aloe." All right, he said. Aloe. The silence stretched heavy, but not empty. He filled the kettle and set it over the fire. Keona crossed the cabin hanging blankets she'd washed the night before to dry near the stove. That's when Beckett noticed her ankle swollen, faintly bruised. You're limping, he said. She glanced at it, then back to him. We walked far. South. 3 days. Anyone chasing you? Her eyes hardened, unreadable. No, not now. That was enough for him. He didn't pry. His mind turned to supplies. Food was running thin. With 2 more mouths, he'd have to ride into town. He hated town. He hadn't stepped foot there since spring, and even then he'd spoken no more than needed. Too many stares. Too many questions. But now he had no choice. I'll head into town tomorrow, he muttered. Dry goods. Boots for the girl. Thread for your dress. Keona shook her head softly. No need. You'll freeze in that. I'll get shoes. She didn't argue further, only lowered her eyes in quiet acceptance. Aloe stirred by the fire, waking slowly. Keona helped her sit, bracing her with a folded blanket at her back. You hungry? Beckett asked. She nodded. Beckett handed over a tin plate of beans. Keona received it in both hands and passed it gently to Aloe. The girl ate quiet, the way her mother did, no noise, no fuss, as if still afraid to be seen. After breakfast, Keona followed Beckett out to the barn, helping gather feed. He showed her where the grain sacks and tools were kept. She studied each latch and motion until she could repeat them. All the while, she kept Aloe within sight, nestled in the corner of the barn, wrapped in spare coats, checked every few minutes. That afternoon, Beckett watched from the corral as Keona sat sewing the torn seam of her dress. She perched on the porch steps, legs folded under hair slipping over her shoulder. Quiet, focused, strong in a way weathered wood is strong. Her dress still sagged, baring more of her chest when she bent over her work. Beckett's eyes caught on her curves before he forced himself to look away. She wasn't his, and he wouldn't treat her like she was. She wasn't his, and he wouldn't fool himself into thinking otherwise. That evening, while Keona dozed by the fire with Aloe curled close, Beckett stepped out and leaned against the porch post. The stars burned sharp and cold above him. Coyotes cried somewhere down in the draw. A few minutes later, Keona joined him, shawl tight across her shoulders, arms folded. They stood side by side in silence for a long stretch. He didn't ask what weighed on her mind, he knew better. But at last she spoke. My husband is gone. Long time now, she said softly. We traveled with others. Apache. Some good. Some not. Beckett kept his eyes on her, waiting. Then men came. White men. Traders, not soldiers, not law, just men. They took food blankets. Wanted more. His jaw clenched. I ran with Aloe. They let us go. Not worth the chase. But I saw what they did to the others. She stared straight ahead. Her face stayed still, but her voice carried weight. I came to you because you fed her. That is enough. In our way it means everything. Beckett exhaled hard. I'm not a good man, he said quietly. I'm just a man alone. That's why I came, she replied. Only men with empty homes make room. He had no words for that, so he stayed quiet. She didn't step closer, but she didn't leave either, and somehow that was enough. They lingered in the cold night until finally going back inside. From that moment forward, neither of them felt truly alone again. Morning came gray and bitter. The sky hung low with clouds, frost glazing the trough. Horses stood stiff in their stalls, breath rising in quick bursts. Beckett was already in the barn before sunrise, cinching the saddle when he noticed movement at the doorway. Keona stood there barefoot again, wrapped in a blanket ankle still swollen. "You should rest," he said. "I help." "Not on that foot," he muttered. She didn't answer, only looked toward Aloe, who sat brushing a pony with the broken-handled brush Beckett had given her the night before. "I'm riding to town," Beckett told her. Keona nodded slowly, then hesitated. "Will they know me there?" He stopped adjusting the bridle. "They'll notice. Will they know my face?" "A fair question." He thought a moment, then shook his head. "Doubt it. Closest Apache bands are days from here. Folks in town wouldn't know your name, let alone your story." She gave a small nod. That was all she needed. He finished tacking up, running through a list in his head. Flour salt beans, jerky needles, thread a blanket for Aloe boots, small enough for her feet, something warm for Keona. Maybe even a spare dress, if he could buy one without drawing questions. As he mounted, Aloe came running, her little legs crunching frost. She pressed a small stick figure made of twine and pine shavings into his gloved hand. "For you." He looked at it. "Thanks." "She said you ride far," Aloe whispered. "I'll be back before sundown," Beckett promised. Keona joined her daughter, resting a hand on the girl's shoulder. "We'll wait." He nodded once, then rode out. It took 2 hours to reach the edge of Sundown Flats. Beckett hadn't stepped into town since spring, then only for fence wire and oats. He never lingered. This time, he had no choice. The general store windows were still covered with tobacco ads. The bell over the door still broken, giving only a weak rattle as he pushed in. Silas McGraw, the shopkeeper, looked up from behind the counter. Same heavy mustache, same suspicious eyes. "Shaw," Silas said, folding his paper. "Didn't expect you before the snow." "Didn't plan to," Beckett answered. Silas gave a tight smile. "What can I do for you?" Beckett listed his needs slow, one by one. He kept back mention of boots too small for a man or thread too fine for his own coat. He didn't ask for a dress. Instead, he asked if Silas had spare fabric. "Got bolts of cotton in the back, some wool scraps too," Silas said. "I'll take both." The man raised a brow, but said nothing. As he packed, Beckett noticed a second-hand coat hanging by the door. Small, lined with rabbit fur. Looked near perfect for Aloe. "How much for the girl's coat?" Silas squinted. "That thing's near falling apart. I'll take it. $2. Beckett laid down the cash. Outside, he strapped the goods to the mule and swung back into the saddle. The trip had taken longer than he liked, and the sky was already darkening with early wind. He pressed his heels and didn't stop till he reached his land. The yard was quiet. No smoke from the chimney. No sound at all. His stomach knotted as he tied off the reins and pushed the cabin door wide. He froze. The fire burned strong. Aloe sat cross-legged on the floor with a tin cup in her hands. Keona stood behind her, one hand on the girl's back, the other stirring a pot with a wooden spoon. She turned to him slowly, eyes steady. "You're late." Beckett stepped inside, closed the door behind him. Weather turned. "You cold? No." He dropped a bundle near the hearth. Aloe scrambled over, tugged open a sack, and gasped when she found the little coat. She held it up to her mother, eyes wide. Keona took it gently, turned it over in her hands, then looked back at Beckett. "You thought of this, not just food." Keona's voice was soft but steady. Beckett gave a small nod. She studied him, then said, "I know what this means." In his world, he didn't answer. Aloe stepped toward him slowly, bare feet padding across the floor. She stopped close enough to feel his presence, but not pressing. In my way, Keona whispered, a man who feeds, protects, and gives warmth is more than shelter. He's home. Beckett shifted slightly in his chair, but didn't move away. I don't make promises, he muttered. I don't need promises, she said. I just want you to know I didn't choose this because I was forced. I chose it because you made space without asking anything in return. She reached out fingers, brushing his forearm lightly, not pleading, only grounding. Beckett held her gaze for a long moment. All right, he said at last. That night they spoke no more. But by the fire, Aloe curled between them, the rabbit-lined coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. Something shifted then. Quiet, unseen, but real. The space between Beckett and Keona no longer felt like distance. It felt like waiting for a door to close at the right time. 3 days slid by. The wind sharpened the nights stretched long. A storm swept the valley, laying white over the ridge. Beckett shoveled the barn path twice just to keep the doors from freezing shut. Mornings came gray and heavy, the cabin air tighter with 3 bodies moving instead of 1. Still, they found rhythm. Keona rose before dawn to stir the fire, boil, water-sort beans and flour without asking. She learned where Beckett kept the salt, the whetstone, the dented tin cups. Aloe followed her mother, sweeping the dirt floor with a pine broom, coughing lightly as the cold pressed her lungs. Keona brewed herbs in water, laid damp cloths to her chest. She knew what she was doing. Beckett noticed. He asked no questions about their past, and Keona offered no answers. Their silence wasn't emptiness, it was survival. Yet something between Beckett and Keona had changed since he'd come back from town. She stayed cautious, still dropped her eyes when she moved past him at the wash basin or bent low near the hearth. But once while sewing her collar tighter, she glanced up, caught him watching. And she didn't look away. That same night, Aloe drifted asleep under the new blanket Beckett had brought home. The cabin glowed warm with fire wind settling outside. Beckett sat at the table mending a harness, fingers clumsy with weariness. Keona sewed by the fire, her dress repaired, neckline higher, now laces firm at the side, yet it still clung close, tracing her curves in the flickering light. He found himself looking more often, but he hadn't touched her. Near midnight, as the fire sank low, Keona rose and crossed to him, her steps slow, deliberate. She took the broken leather from his hands without a word. She turned it over, thumb brushing the split. You pulled too hard, she said calmly. No need. Watch your hands. You always fix things yourself, she asked. He nodded. Had to. She laid the leather back down, then stood between him and the firelight, her figure outlined in gold and shadow. Her expression stayed grave. I'm not afraid of men, she said. I never thought you were. I'm afraid of what men think they own. Beckett leaned forward, elbows on the table. I don't own you. Her head tilted. Not yet. Her voice carried no accusation, only truth. You're not here because I claimed you, he said. I know. I'm here because you didn't. Silence again, but heavy with meaning. Keona stirred the coals, then sat back down. You had a wife? She asked at last. Beckett gave a single nod. Years ago, a child never born. Keona pulled her knees close. I had a sister. She was with us before the men came. What happened? She hesitated. She didn't run fast enough. Beckett understood. They said nothing more. But before sleep, Keona spread an extra blanket beside Aloe, once only hers, making space wide enough for someone else. She didn't say who it was for. She didn't have to. By dawn, Beckett woke to the smell of salt pork and black coffee. Keona stood barefoot at the stove sleeves' rolled hips, swaying as she worked pots and pans. Aloe was outside, cheeks red from the cold gathering kindling in the new coat. Beckett stepped behind Keona to reach a tin cup. He didn't touch her, but she leaned back ever so slightly. Not away. Toward him. The day's shortened snow stuck hard. The creek froze shallow. Each evening the cabin closed in tighter, but the lines between them softened. Keona set Beckett's tin cup apart from the rest. She filled his plate without waiting for him to ask. Sometimes she called him cow, puzzling over the word, with a shy grin when he answered. He never corrected her. That morning, Beckett split wood behind the cabin while Keona stood by with a pail of hot water and rags. Aloe sat on the porch steps, humming a tune only she knew, patching her doll's cloth arm. The sun hit the snow in sharp flashes, but the shine didn't last. "You'll need more wool," Keona said, watching Beckett stack wood along the fence. "Soon. I'll head down again before the pass ice is over. We'll come." "No." His eyes fixed on her. "If they see you, they'll start asking questions I've got no mind to answer." Keona's stare didn't falter. "You ashamed of us?" Beckett wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. "No. Just careful. There's folks in town who don't think Apache blood belongs this close to their fences, especially not under a white man's roof. Then let them talk." She turned back toward the porch. "Truth keeps you warm. Their words don't?" He didn't answer, but her words stayed with him long after the woodpile was high. That night they shared stew and cornbread around the table, not scattered, but together. Aloe told him how many crows she counted that day. 6, maybe 7. Last one might have been a raven. And Beckett found himself listening, even smiling, not at the birds, but at her voice, no longer trembling. After supper, Keona washed dishes beside him. Elbows brushed now and again. She reached for a cloth behind him, and the curve of her breast grazed his arm through her mended dress, torn still at the neckline low enough to notice. He noticed. She noticed. Neither spoke of it. When the dishes were done, Beckett sat by the fire boots off, rubbing at his bad ankle, aching from the cold. Keona crossed the room, slow, deliberate, and sat beside him without asking. Her thigh rested against his. Her dress slid higher, showing the smooth line of her leg. She didn't adjust it. Her eyes stayed on the fire. "You limp more," she murmured. "Old wound? War? What side union? Still got enemies. Some days, but I don't go looking for 'em." She studied his hands. "You don't shake when you sleep anymore." His head turned. "You've been watching first night you brought us here. You flinched like someone was after you." Beckett didn't deny it. "Been a long while since I shared a roof." Keona shifted, turning toward him. "I know what it is to dream of hands around your throat and wake without a sound." He watched her, her voice calm, though her fists were clenched in her lap. "You're safe here," he said. "I know, but safety don't shrink the past, it only quiets it." She placed her hand on his chest, thumb brushing the pale scar near his collarbone. A bullet scar. She didn't ask. Her hand lingered warm, steady. "Do you still think I came only for tradition?" she whispered. He looked into her eyes. The question carried no demand, just a need for truth. "No." "Then tell me what you see when you look at me." "I see a woman who's survived worse than she'll ever say out loud. I see someone who holds her dignity even when the world tried to steal it." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "And if I told you I wanted more than shelter, would you pull away?" Beckett's hand found her waist. His thumb traced where cloth met skin. He didn't press, didn't pull, just stayed. "I'd stay," he said. She leaned close, their foreheads touching. Her lips brushed his cheek, lingering near his mouth. She didn't press further. He didn't push. That night, when Aloe slept sound beneath the quilts, Keona slipped into Beckett's bed for the first time. Still clothed, her hand tucked inside his shirt, her body warm against him. They didn't make love. They didn't speak. But sleep came for both without ghosts. At dawn, pale light pushed through frosted panes. The storm had passed in the night, leaving Comet Ridge under thick white silence. Rafters groaned under snow. The fire had burned low, but the bed was warm. Keona lay beside him, her arm draped over his chest, her braid loosened across his shoulder, her leg over his. Her dress rumpled her curves, soft and real under the blankets. She hadn't asked. She'd simply stayed. Beckett didn't move for a long while. He listened to the hush, felt the weight of her against him. He didn't feel trapped. He felt kept. Aloe coughed from the other side of the room. A dry rasp followed by rustling blankets. Beckett shifted and Keona stirred, opening her eyes. There was no shame there. No apology. Just calm. "I'll get her water," she whispered. "I've got it," Beckett said. She watched him cross the room. Barefoot, shirtless scars plain in the firelight, old burns, a bullet exit wound, rope marks on his wrists. She didn't look away. He knelt beside Aloe, touched her forehead gently, still warm but no fever. "You all right, little bird?" he asked. Aloe nodded. Aloe's eyes drooped half shut. "Throat hurts." Beckett handed her a tin cup of warm water, then dipped a cloth in the basin and pressed it to her neck. Keona stepped behind him, holding a pouch of dried herbs. "I'll brew tea. It'll ease her." They moved together without words, as though they'd been doing it for years. Later that morning, snow drifted soft and lazy outside. Aloe was bundled in blankets and set on a chair by the hearth, clutching a doll of rags and sticks Keona had stitched the day before. She leaned back against the wall, voice small. "I don't want to go back." Beckett glanced up. "Back where?" She shook her head. "Anywhere but here." Keona froze at the stove, her shoulders tight. Beckett crossed the room and crouched beside the girl. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not unless you and your mama decide to." Aloe studied him. "You talk in your sleep," she whispered. Beckett blinked. "What do I say?" "You say her name." "Not Mama, the other one." His jaw clenched. Aloe's face gave nothing away. He rose slowly. "I used to talk to ghosts," he said. "Not anymore." That evening after dinner, when the fire cracked steady and Aloe slept sound, Keona stepped out onto the porch. Beckett followed. The moon spilled silver across the snow, the air cold but not cruel. The sky stretched wide, pure and still. Keona stood with her arms folded, shawl pulled tight. Yet her dress dipped low at the neck, the wind tugging at its edges. She didn't adjust it. Beckett's eyes lingered not with hunger, but with awe. She wasn't trying to tempt him. She was just herself, bare, honest, strong. He stepped closer. "You miss your people." She nodded. "Some are gone, others. They gave me no choice. A woman without a husband is a danger. You had no brothers, none who stayed." He let that sit a moment. "Ever wish to go back? I wanted Aloe born into something better. But now I think maybe this is better. A man who listens. A roof that holds. A child who sleeps without fear. You think I'm that man? He asked. She nodded. You don't touch without meaning. You wait. You make room. She turned then facing him. Her fingers lifted, untying the string behind her neck. The top of her dress loosened, falling just enough to bare the hollow of her throat, the line of her collarbone, the swell of her breasts in the lantern glow spilling from the cabin. I choose you, she whispered. Not because I owe you, because I want to. Beckett's chest rose slow and heavy. He said nothing. He stepped closer, hand settling at her waist, fingers curling against soft deerskin. She didn't flinch. His hands slid up her back, drawing her near until their bodies touched. Her dress slipped lower. He kissed her shoulder slow, then her neck, then her mouth. She kissed him back, deep, steady, hungry. Inside, Aloe dreamed. Outside, snow whispered down the ridge. That night, Keona lay in Beckett's bed again. But this time, the dress came off, and no one dreamed of ghosts. The sun was already climbing when Beckett opened his eyes. The cabin glowed warm from the dying fire. Keona lay beside him, one arm across his chest. Her body curved into his. Her braid had come undone, her hair spilling across his shoulder. She looked peaceful, anchored, as though she belonged, and knew it. For the first time in years, he felt no weight pressing on him. No ache from yesterday's sorrow. Just the hum of something real. He slipped carefully from the bed, tucking the blanket over her shoulder. She stirred, but didn't wake. Aloe's cough broke the silence, dry, faint. Beckett moved to the hearth, poured warm water into a tin cup, and knelt by her pallet. Morning, little bird, he said. She blinked at him. Did you sleep in your bed last night? Yeah. With Mama. He gave a small nod. We both did. Aloe sipped the water and smiled before sinking back against the blanket. Good. Just that one word, but it carried more than she knew. Beckett sat near her as she drank. Outside, patches of snow melted under a weak sun, the air shifting toward a brief thaw. It meant the barn roof had to be reinforced before the next storm. By mid-morning, Beckett was on the barn roof with a hammer and a stack of cedar shingles. Keona worked below, passing planks, sleeves rolled high, her dress hitched to keep from dragging in the wet earth. Her legs were steady, her eyes sharper, always watching first Aloe as she played, then lifting to Beckett as he worked. He caught himself staring once as she bent for a board, her dress slipping along her hip, skin flashing smooth in the light. He looked away quickly, not from shame, but from wanting too much. That want had deepened, grown dangerous, if not honored, right. Keona's eyes caught his. Something wrong? No, he said, just thinking how quiet this place used to be. It's not quiet now. It's full. She smiled and left it there. When the shingles were nailed down tight, they sat on the porch, Aloe napping inside. Beckett handed Keona a tin cup of coffee. She sipped slowly, wrapped in the blanket he'd set across her shoulders. Her neckline had loosened again, but Beckett didn't stare. He didn't have to. He already knew her shape by memory. I want to stay, she said softly. You're already here. No, not like I'm borrowing time. I mean for good. Beckett studied her. You thought I'd send you away? I don't always trust peace to last. He set his cup down, leaned forward on his knees. Keona, I didn't take you in out of pity. I didn't touch you out of guilt. I want you here. I want her here." She reached out, then her hand finding his. Her fingers were rough worn from work. "Then say it out loud," once Keona told him softly. "So I know I'm not dreaming." Beckett nodded slow. "You belong here. You and Aloe both. Long as I'm breathing, this is your home." Her eyes softened. She didn't cry. Keona wasn't one to cry easy, but she kissed his hand, pressed it to her cheek, and whispered something in Apache he didn't understand, though he felt it all the same. That night, after Aloe drifted to sleep, Keona found Beckett sitting at the edge of the bed, unlacing his boots. She slipped behind him, slid her arms around his chest, and laid her cheek against his back. He leaned into her warmth. "There's no tradition binding this now," he murmured. "Just us." "I know," she whispered. "That's why it matters." They lay together again that night, slower, gentler. His hands traced her curves. His lips brushed her collarbone, and he undressed her without haste, as if certain now she wouldn't vanish come morning. She fell asleep in his arms, his hand resting at her waist, while he wondered how something so broken had turned into something whole. Questions remained: what happened to her people if the men who hurt them still lurked? But none of that belonged to this night. Tonight they were safe. Tonight they were already a family. The next morning, Beckett sat on the porch steps, sharpening a skinning knife, while Aloe braided twine beside him. Fog hung low over the ridge, lifting slow, as the sun tried to break through. Inside, Keona folded blankets, humming a tune, an Apache song, soft and timeless, older than memory. It had been 2 weeks since they'd first crossed his threshold. Life had found a rhythm, but it no longer felt temporary. Beckett still carried questions, though he'd held them back until that afternoon, when he stepped inside and found Keona waiting at the table. Her hands folded, her face calm but heavy. "There are things I haven't told you," she said. "I don't want them catching us unprepared." He sat down silent. "I wasn't just passing through. We were running from a trading post south of here, a small one not marked on maps, run by men outside the law." Her eyes dropped to the table. "They trade first. And in people, mostly girls. I worked there a season, kept to myself, tried to keep Aloe hidden. But when the man who ran the post learned she was mine, Apache-born, he said she'd fetch a higher price. He meant to take her." Beckett's fists curled white against the table. "I fought," Keona continued. "Cut. One of them grabbed Aloe and we ran. Snow came early, I think it slowed them. But they might still come." "You believe they'll follow?" Beckett asked. "I don't know. But I couldn't let you promise us safety without knowing the danger that could walk through your door." He leaned forward, elbows braced. "I already promised. Whatever's coming, it ain't your fault. And if they try, they'll have to come through me first." Keona nodded, her jaw tight. "You needed the truth. You deserve the choice." "I made my choice the day I opened that door." She exhaled, shoulders easing. Then she rose, moved around the table. Beckett stood too, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head to his chest. He held her hand at the back of her neck. That night, Beckett laid his Henry rifle across the table and checked it piece by piece. Keona watched quietly. She knew that look. It wasn't fear, but readiness. They spoke of plans. If men came, she and Aloe would slip through the barn while Beckett faced the door. But part of them trusted the snow had buried enough distance between past and present. The days passed quietly. Keona mended curtains, stacked shelves, even built a drawer from scraps Beckett had left for years. Aloe marked the hearth with charcoal, childlike symbols. Yet Beckett saw the truth of it. She was planting roots. One afternoon, Keona came to him by the barn, a question heavy in her eyes. "If something happened to you," she asked, "would you want to be buried here?" Beckett looked out to the slope behind the cabin to the weathered tree standing alone. He'd thought it often. "I would." "I'd bury you beside your wife," she said. He stiffened. "You know her name. I said it once in my sleep," Sarah Keona whispered. He let out a long breath. "I loved her." "I know." She paused. "But I'm not her." Her words weren't bitter, just truth. "You're not," Beckett said. "You're here." She kissed him, then slow eyes open. He held her waist, steadying her. That night, after Aloe curled asleep between the pelts, Beckett and Keona lay face to face in the dark. Her hand rested over his chest. "I want your child," she said suddenly. He blinked. "You sure I didn't come here just to survive?" "I want a life, a full one." He brushed her cheek with his thumb. "Then we'll try." Their kiss wasn't urgent, it was deliberate, certain. Her dress slid from her shoulders as his hands traced her hips. She moved against him, not as a guest, but as a woman claiming her place by his side. Afterward, when she lay across his chest, her breath slowed. Her hand rested over his heart like she'd always known its rhythm. Outside, the first owl of the season called through the trees. Inside, they belonged. Fully. Finally. By late winter, the land began to change. Snow no longer clung to every branch, and patches of earth showed beneath the ice-crusted trail behind the barn. Meltwater carved thin streams down the ridge. Spring wasn't far, the sound of birds would return, and pine needles would whisper in the wind again. In the cabin, warmth lived not just in the fire, but in the rhythm of their lives together. Beckett came in from the barn, carrying wood across one arm. Aloe was kneeling by the hearth, helping Keona grind herbs with a flat stone. The smell of meat broth filled the air. Keona rose, wiped her hands, and crossed to him. She placed a hand low on her belly eyes, meeting his in a way that told him what words didn't need to. She was with child. He set the wood down carefully and stood there, hands on his hips. His voice was rough in the cold air. "You sure?" she nodded. "I've carried before." "I know." He stepped forward, laid his hand gently over hers, and held it there. It wasn't shock. It wasn't fear. It was something heavier gravity. The weight of a new life. A second chance. That night, while Aloe slept sound in the loft Beckett had built for her, he and Keona sat on the porch, watching winter's last breath drift across the fields. She leaned against him in one of his coats. He wrapped both arms around her. "You ever think this would be your life?" she asked. "No," he answered truthfully. "Not once." "You want me to take your name?" she asked, staring at the snow-covered trees. Beckett went still. "You take it," she said. "I already live in your house. I bear your child. Aloe calls you father. I'm yours if you want me to be named." His jaw worked. Then he said, "Then take it." She nodded slowly. "Say it. Keona Shaw." The words settled in the air like they'd always been true. "Then you'll marry me, yes," she whispered. "And not because I owe you, but because I choose." Their kiss was slow, certain. Spring came early that year. A few weeks later, Beckett rode into Sundown Flats with Keona beside him. She wore a blue cotton dress he'd traded from a traveling merchant, her hair braided neat. Aloe sat in front of him on the saddle, clinging to his coat. At the clerk's office, they signed the county ledger and walked out, husband and wife. No sermon, no crowd. Just ink and the bond they'd already built day by day. People stared. A white man, an Apache woman. But Beckett didn't flinch. He took her hand in plain view as they walked past the saloon. No one said a word. Back on the ridge, life pressed forward. By the third month, Keona began to show. Aloe stitched bits of cloth for a nursery corner. Beckett built a pine rocking chair, sanding each board late into the night. Hands that once only knew survival now built permanence. By midsummer, Keona gave birth to a strong boy with dark eyes and lungs loud enough to shake the rafters. Beckett wept as he held him unashamed and kissed Keona's forehead, whispering thanks into her hair. They named him Samuel, after Beckett's father. Aloe taught him songs from both worlds. By fall, the cabin was no longer just shelter. It was home. One evening, as the fire burned low and Samuel slept in a cradle, Beckett stood behind Keona by the hearth, his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him, heavy with contentment. "I never thought I'd have this," he said. "Not again." She turned, pressing his hand over her heart. "You never lost it. It just hadn't found you yet." He kissed her slow, sure. And that night, like every night after he stayed. Not out of duty. Not because of tradition. But because he finally had something worth staying for. And this time, it stayed with him too. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.